want to introduce Mazen and Jesse, and many of you on this Zoom already know him and know that he is a distinguished professor, and he was born and raised under Israel occupation, and that he spent many years as a scholar in the United States. Jessie shared with me last week that she's a CPA and that she has been practicing as an accountant for many, many years. They've been married for many years and returned to Palestine, invested in Palestine, and founded and now volunteer at the Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability at Bethlehem University. I've asked them to talk a little bit about how that happened. And so now I'm just going to turn it over to the two of you.
Well, what can I say? Very briefly, I was born in the shepherd's field, where the shepherds heard the angels sing, went up to Bethlehem, where Jesus was born. This is our biblical tradition. My family is Christian. When I was being raised in the 1960s as a child, I witnessed my first traumatic change in our lives when the Israeli military came rolling in. It was not a war really in 1967. It was more like an Israelis just taking over the areas. Nobody defending those areas or fighting. There was no bullets fired. But I say traumatic because our lives changed dramatically. A Jordanian rule, of course, before 1967 was not a colonizing occupation. It was just that Jordan annexed the West Bank with its people. And then Israel came and was a colonizing occupation, and the army, unlike the Jordanian army, for example, was, never saw really Jordanian army here. They had their barracks in the areas like along the Jordan River or something, and not much here. But the Israeli military was ubiquitous and was brutal and violent. Even 1968, I witnessed them as a child, beating my father and stuff like that. But anyways, that was the beginning of my political awakening, is post-1967 conflict, if you want to call it that, even though, as I said, there was not much of a war. It was more of just the Israeli occupation. Sometimes it's called 6-day war because it took 6 days for the Israeli infantry to walk across the areas they occupied, the West Bank, Sinai, Gaza, Golan Heights, etc. And, from my childhood, I remember, my mother was very, caring for refugees, and she informed me that those are refugees from the Nakba. And then she related the story of her friend who was killed in 1948 in Deir Yassin massacre. So this is how I grew up. I grew up under occupation, under military occupation. But I also grew up loving nature and walking the valleys around my town and other places, enjoying that kind of nature, science kind of exploration. This is what led me to science and to going for a bachelor degree in biology, master's in zoology, and then PhD in genetics. Curiosity about the world around us. And then I stayed in the US. That's where I got my master's and PhD. Stayed for a while there, and then I was always planning to come back. It was a matter of timing, and maybe I waited too long. But in a way, I guess that also has an advantage that I managed to save a little bit of money so that I can come back here and donate it to start this Museum of Natural History and Institute of Biodiversity and Sustainability. So this is basically what led me to come back 2008. And Jessie soon joined me afterwards. We had met in Lubbock, Texas, and she was doing her degree and I was doing my degree. So this is how we end up back here. And if Jessie wants to add something, she can go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I met Mazen within the first week after I arrived at the university at the US at the international student orientation, because I am totally new and, you know, I needed a orientation at the university where to go and where can I find things, what is the help on campus. And I saw Mazen was at this orientation also for international students. And I just got to talk to him, and then I have and he said he's from Palestine and he's from Bethlehem. And I said, was that where Jesus was born? You know, this is all my Christian religion knowledge is. I know Jesus' birthplace in Bethlehem. So that really got me very, very intrigued and interesting, because back home in where I grew up in Taiwan, we have the Western media. So, and I always saw on the media about Palestinian protest, and chanting, wearing a keffiyehs and cover their heads, and you had the impression of that they are the violent part, and then on the Israeli side, we were told that they're fighting for their countries. All the men and women have to serve in the military, but the women still participate in the beauty pageant. And so I was pretty sheltered before. So, you know, we will be cheering for the Israeli beauty pageant contestant because they were, you know, serving in the military. And so knew the Palestinian, you know, the violent, the terrorists. That's what you get from the media. So, knowing Mazen, so really got me very interested to know more about Palestinian and about Palestine. And so Mazen was a so dedicated student and teacher and scientist, because he had to teach a bachelor student when he was doing his PhD. So he was teaching and he was doing research, and worked till midnight, past midnight, most of the time. And so this is a totally different image as I knew about Palestinians. So, and so he's also a great cook. So immediately, you know, it's a really good advantage knowing a guy can cook. So I think one of the other reason that Mazen decided to come back to Palestine is just to spend more time with his mother, up in age. So that is that is one positive side. And his mother passed away last year, so we did get a lot of 10 plus years being with her. And also he's trying to come back and to empower the young people here. Changing the way, resolving the situation or the running of the institution or the organization in more democratic way. So he's trying to bring some positive side from the West to here, and also bringing his knowledge on the cytogenetics knowledge to Palestine. So he immediately started a cytogenetics lab at the Bethlehem University when he first came back. So that was one of the first cytogenetics lab in Palestine. Yeah, otherwise, people here, the doctors, the hospital, they send such cases to Israel to do it. But with this lab at Bethlehem University, there's an alternative to do it within the Palestinian territory, and it would be less expensive. So yeah, we've been very, very active since coming here. I thought of this will be my retirement, because after working quite a long times as a CPA, which is really hard work, and I was going to relax, retire, or take it easy over here. But we're really much more busier with the different type of work, seeing the difference on the ground rather than just kind of rat races in the US, and trying to cover the expenses and materialistic living, and you have to spend time cutting the grass and mowing the lawn or shovel the snow. So all those we don't have to do it here. So we got save those time for other productivity.
Well, we're so happy that you're there and that you came, to meet us on your tour. I can say that I had no idea really of the complexity of this situation. I honestly did not understand that a Nakba had occurred, that there was all this violence happening in the West Bank, and I just want you to know how much your wisdom and what you're doing has changed my life. And last time we talked, Jesse, I felt this amazing love of Palestine and the flora and the fauna, and just, I felt that when I met you the first time, and Mazen was talking about, saving animals and the beauty of spring. So I would love it if you would just tell us about, the unique bioregion of Palestine and what it is that you're doing with your institute.
I'm actually, as I'm speaking, I'm finalizing this report on the Jordan Valley. The Jordan Valley is very rich in biodiversity. It has the lowest point on Earth, and it's semi-tropical in climate. And then you go up the mountains and you get a very rich Mediterranean flora and fauna. So Palestine has always been very rich in biodiversity for a number of reasons: geological, geographic, historical, etc. Geological because of the diversity of the elevations and geology. geographical, for example, because of its position between Africa and Asia, and as a corridor for migration of animals and plants, etc. Even humans migrated out of Africa to the rest of the world through Palestine. There's also the richness that is, when we look at even migrating birds that travel from Europe to Africa annually, 500 million birds pass through Palestine. So it's a very rich country in terms of biodiversity. But it's also a very threatened country in terms of biodiversity. I mean, the whole world, of course, is threatened by many factors. One could list the main factors that affect loss of habitats and biodiversity around the world. And those are climate change, pollution, habitat destruction, overexploitation of natural resources, and invasive species. And here we can add the sixth one, perhaps even more weighty than the others, which is colonization. The Zionist project in Palestine involved devastation of our environment. I don't have time to go through it, but from destroying Palestinian indigenous trees and planting in place of them European pine trees, to diversion of water from Lake Tiberias, etc. Many, many things that the Zionists have destroyed in our environment. So this combination of richness and biodiversity and great threats to biodiversity makes our task even more challenging, if you want, and yet, of course, more important. So this is part of the reason why we've decided to come and invest our money and our time, volunteers in this Palestine Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainability, which we founded. So the idea is biodiversity and sustainability, meaning sustainable human and natural communities, sustainable habitats, sustainable communities of humans also, which are part of nature. So this is what we aim to do.
I learned that Palestine is such a small area, but has 5 different what's it called?
Phytogeographical zones.
Yeah, five different zones, phytogeographic zone with the different biodiversity habitat. So when I travel when we go to the field, without having to go really far, you will see different landscape and habitat. So it's very, it's so rewarding and so nice to see the desert when you're in the Jordan Valley, just less than an hour away. You see, the barren hills, the desert, and the Dead Seas, and then going to a different area to the south, the Hebron area, you'll see a different habitats. And in the Bethlehem area, this Judean mountain here, and so most of the place here are hills. So people's houses are built along the hill at the slope. So most of the houses have very nice view, and it's quite different than living in the U.S. in the big city, the flat, and you don't have this a perspective. You're looking outside your window in the U.S. This is quite different than looking outside the window here. So also partly, I really, really think this place, Palestine, is very beautiful, coming from a urban living background. There's very no small garden around your yard. It's only the high-rise apartments. So over here, we are pretty fortunate. His family, we have small garden around the house. So there's all kinds of fruit trees. I think I mentioned about fruit trees last time. But I forgot to mention about olive trees, wonderful trees, and so so resilient and so strong and enduring and green. It's all evergreen and all year around, and then it give us olives and olive oil that we harvest, and we can get it pressed to olive oil. And that's one thing that it will be very hard to give up, because when we used to live in the US, we go to Costco to buy the big bottle of olive oil, but it says extra virgin, but it's not really 100% extra virgin, and it's quite expensive. And over here, we got the oil, and it's from the sweat, because we actually harvest by hand. And the time and the effort and the joy of all the people helping and picking olives together. And then you got this pure dark green olive oil, and it's I just can't imagine without that experience, without that sweet olive oil.
You're talking my music here, because I lived in Oroville, California for a while, and two of my best friends owned, one of them recently passed, my friend, her name was Olivia. And Olivia and Darrow owned the oldest organic olive grove in California. And they did everything in a natural way like you're describing. And I got really used to fresh olive leaves, which are so good for you, olive leaf tea, and just crunching up olive leaves. And, it's a very highly regarded supplement. And also just the taste of organic olive oil is so different than anything we can get in our stores here. And so I totally relate to the olives and the olive oil. The reason that they have this property is because in the 1930s, the Berkeley professors understood the value of olives and olive oil for human health. And so they bought this grove. And my friends bought it in foreclosure and brought it back. So yeah, I'm so happy that you're there and that you're cultivating olives. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about, the land of milk and honey, the, ecology of Palestine, and the impact of this war, what we stand to lose from this degradation.
Palestine as a whole should be declared the World Heritage Site. The UNESCO declares World Heritage sites like, the Egyptian pyramids, or the Church of Nativity, and a few other places around the world. There's hundreds of sites around the world. I think the whole country of Palestine is a World Heritage Site for many, many, many reasons. Palestine, for example, is the western part of the Fertile Crescent. This is where we humans first developed agriculture, where we first domesticated things like olives and wheat and barley and chickpeas, hummus, and so many other things, and domesticated also wild animals like goats and sheep in this Fertile Crescent. So the Fertile Crescent is a cradle of human natural heritage, agricultural heritage, also when people developed agriculture, they had time on their hands, so they developed quote unquote civilizations. And so this is also the cradle of civilizations, the first writings, the first music, the first laws, all these firsts that we are famous for as people of the Fertile Crescent are a human, collective human heritage. They are not Palestinian heritage or Canaanite heritage. They are human heritage. And in fact, sometimes I tell internationals visiting here that your ancestors are Palestinians, because actually, as I mentioned earlier, Palestinians, Palestine was the first out of Africa migration of humanoids, humans, individuals from East Africa. So, and then they spread to Europe, and humans spread to Europe, Asia, China, whatever. So actually the ancestors of all humans, other than Africans, of course, is through Palestine and Palestinian Canaanitic people. So they were the ones, also the Phoenicians were the ones who developed shipping and trade routes and so forth. And that is our collective human heritage. So when you drink your beer, for example, think that without Palestine and domestication of barley, we wouldn't have beer. Coffee is from Yemen, but coffee is spread to the rest of the world through the Ottoman Empire from that domestication of coffee beans in Yemen through Palestine. That's how it spread to the rest of the world. So I think, olives, as I mentioned, olives were first domesticated here about 4,500 years or 5,000 years ago. And then from then on, it was spread to Southern Europe and became a staple of European food, and then Roman food. And then, of course, spread to the rest of the world, olive oil, pickled olives, etc. And I could go on, but my point is that our heritage is a collective human heritage that is related to our region here, and that's why this region is important. Now, in terms of, the impact of war on Palestine, and on this heritage. This is both a cultural heritage and a natural heritage. And sometimes the line between those two things are not quite distinct, because as I said, we are part of nature. So humans lived with nature. So we are also natural species. So our cultural heritage, for example, our proverbs here in Palestine are mostly related to agriculture. And you find the proverbs and the use of language in even in English, we talk about the seed of innovation and things like that. It's agricultural in some sense, So there is an agricultural cultural heritage. There's a natural heritage. All of these things are tied, and they are all endangered, as I mentioned earlier, by colonization, climate change, habitat destruction, etc. Now, I just finished writing a paper on the impact of the wars, plural, conflicts in general, on the natural environment, and I don't have too much time to go through them. But you can imagine, it's not any secrets that even pre-conflict preparations like trainings and military use a lot of greenhouse gases emitting substances, fuels, for example, jet fuels, etc. So pre-conflict, There's conflict impacts, including like use of bombs and white phosphorus and things like that, depleted uranium that are devastating to the environment. The damage that these bombs cause, not just to people who are part of nature, but also to nature itself, fauna and flora. And then there's the post-conflict impact, including things like unexploded mines and shells and things like that, that provide devastation for our environment. In fact, I would venture to say, here's the bizarre thing, the military in all countries, not just Israeli military, but the US military especially, is the largest polluter, largest creator of greenhouse gases as a single unit. Not even, certain industries or whatever. And not only that, but the military also destroys a lot of the environment. And also when you think of the cost of the military, I mean, you can end world hunger, by the way, with just 3% of the budget of the US military. So 3% of the budget of the US military would end world hunger. And so I think, it's a devastating, and we need to think about militarism as an environmental issue.
So Mazen, when you were talking about the World Heritage Site and, the birthplace of civilization, can you also speak to us about a one-state solution? Because it seems to me that that all comes together, that, we're all Semites. I mean, when you really analyze that word, right? The Semitic languages all go back to Africa as well. And so, this idea that we can separate Israel and Palestine into two states doesn't make any sense to me. I was just wondering if you would speak to that.
Yeah. One thing I would just like to emphasize is when we talk about the state, I don't necessarily like that term. States, if they refer to nation states, this is a European concept that's created in the 19th century, and it's a failed concept, the idea of a state as a nation state, with borders and flags and nationalism and all this. I think that that's a failed concept. And even Europe is going away from this concept towards a European Union. And Europe is the one who invented this concept after a decline of empires. So I'm not sure I'm in favor of a concept of one state. Maybe one country is more rational, geographic area. This is Palestine, is a geographic area. It's one country. It has been one country, is always will be one country, despite the machinations of colonizers, etc. So this country needs to have, concepts like democracy and human rights and justice. These are not just terms we should throw around and leave it that. We should actually implement them because they are key to peace. You cannot have peace without human rights. You cannot have peace without justice or without democracy, in my humble opinion. So developing and establishing these concepts and strengthening them in our country would be a desirable thing to do, to replace what already is there, which is racism and apartheid and an idea of a Jewish state, not a democratic state. So a Jewish state, by definition, is anti-democratic because it's a country or a state, if you want, nation state, created for and by the Jewish people, against the wishes of the indigenous native people, Christians, Muslims, Baha'i, Druze, and also indigenous Jews who were against this idea of a Jewish state or Zionism. So this is why we think it's the most logical, most rational. We, being the Palestinians, the vast majority of us support this concept of democracy, human rights, equality under the rule of law, ending apartheid and ending colonialism, decolonization, if you want. This has been the case, and we are joined in this by decent Jews, by decent people from around the world who are struggling with us to end this nightmare that was created when the Western powers, in their silly wisdom, thinking that divide and conquer is a way to go in our region. And so they created these quote unquote nation states like Jordan, like Syria, like Egypt, like Israel, as they call it. I prefer, of course, the geography is Palestine. But anyways, that's why we think it's logical to decolonize and to remove apartheid and have equality. This will be a win-win situation for everybody. And it's the only solution. I wrote a whole book about this, explaining why it's the only solution to this decades prolonged colonization, occupation. My book
What is the name of your book?
Yeah, it's called Sharing the Land of Canaan, and it's available on my website, kumsiya.org. You can read it on my website. You don't even have to buy it.
Jesse, I know that you have to leave in a little bit. Would you like to share anything more with us?
I think you're going to read a poem.
I am going to read a poem. It's by Wendell Berry, and then we'll go into questions. So here's what Wendell Berry has to say about the peace of wild things. I went through so many poems. I went from Palestinian writers to Rumi last night, and I just couldn't find anything that kind of captured something about the two of you for me, but this does. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in the beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. That's Wendell Berry. Okay, so questions from the community?
Can't not ask about aquifers, because I've just been thinking about them, where they're located. I've heard there's aquifers in Gaza as well as the West Bank. So I'd like to hear more about that amazing magic. I don't know very much about it, so I'd like to hear more, please.
Yeah, we have a northern aquifer, an eastern aquifer, western aquifer, and then the coastal aquifer. So there are 4 aquifers. These are areas where water seeps through from the rain, of course, underground and accumulates, and in some places bursts out into springs, if you want. And we have hundreds of springs. Most of them are now off limits, 95%, 98% are off limits to the local indigenous Palestinians and are Jewish only, if you want. That's how they they describe them. And so that's the problem, is there's a huge problem in the water apartheid, if you want to use that term, system of water apartheid, where we get 1/8 of the water that's relegated to the colonial settlers per capita, I'm talking about. And not only that, but due to wars and conflicts, these aquifers are being depleted and destroyed. The coastal aquifer, for example, in Gaza is already unusable. Gaza people, even if they're able to rebuild the Gaza Strip and try to dig water wells to get from the aquifer drinking water, they will not be able to use that water. It's heavily salted and polluted, etc. For example, in the last few weeks, Israel has been pumping seawater into the tunnels that Hamas built for their resistance. And of course, the seawater seeps into the aquifer also. So, and you add to that, of course, the depleted uranium and pollution from dust and other things as a result of pulverization of Gaza, you have a huge problem.
Where are the aquifers? Because you mentioned about going north and south in the West Bank.
The northern aquifer is the northern West Bank plus the Galilee. That's where the water accumulates. Eastern aquifer is just along the eastern slopes and so on and so forth.
Like was eastern slope, maybe.
Eastern slopes of the
Yeah.
West Bank would be places like from Nablus to the east, from Jerusalem to the east, from Bethlehem to the east.
That's okay. Are there actual aquifers in the Jordan Valley?
Yes, the Jordan Valley area is part of the eastern slopes, so it's part of the eastern aquifer.
And so Mazen, will you just define aquifer for us? That's the deep well of water in the deep earth.
Well, it's you see, when it rains, water goes through the soil, through the rocks to find places that it can be settled in, and it cannot go any deeper because the rocks become harder. So this area that has water trapped basically between layers of rocks and caves, etc., is what we call an aquifer. It's not like a container or anything. It's just a large space that stores water in mountains, etc. And in some places, you find that there's a outlet that allows the water to come out. And that's what we call springs, right?
Right.
Which then develop into rivers and wadis, valleys, etc. This is what an aquifer is.
I remember in California when the aquifer was so depleted because there was no rain for like 3 years, and our lake became so low that they actually took pictures of it because it had never been that low before. So
Exactly. The recharge of the aquifer is the rainfall. Rainfall is what recharges the aquifer, fills it up. Discharge from the aquifer is what when people dig wells in the aquifer, they dig deep to draw water, pump it up. Also from the springs, of course, that's discharge from the aquifer. So there's a recharge and there's a discharge. The balance between them is what keeps the aquifer going. If there's no balance between them, if there is less rain or if there is more withdrawal than there is recharge, then of course you have depletion of the aquifer. And we have depletion of our aquifers now accelerating.
And the Palestinian people don't have control over their own water.
Right. all these aquifers, Palestinians cannot dig for water. Palestinians in most areas, actually, in 92, 93% of historic Palestine, we cannot even collect rainwater. We are not allowed to collect rainwater.
How do they stop that?
By preventing you from building storage facilities, cisterns for collecting rainwater. They
Even a
come-
rain barrel, you're not allowed? Like you're not even allowed to have a rain barrel?
Yes, you're not allowed in most of the areas, like Area C in the West Bank, you're not allowed to collect rainwater.
No,
You're not
wow.
allowed to build a cistern or have a large barrel that collects the rainwater. Before Oslo, this was also true of areas A and B. You could not build cisterns, you could not collect rainwater. You could not own milking cows also before Oslo. Now you cannot own milking cows in Area C or in areas that are considered Jewish areas, which is 93% of the historic land of Palestine.
I just wanted to share if I could. Went back to Mark Ellis, Out of the Ashes. He's a Jewish theologian. And it is so powerful. That's all I want to say, because you, Mazin, recommended the book to me. And then it's taken me to the book After Auschwitz and just lots of exploration. And I feel so committed to a one country, one shared country. As a Jewish person, I just went to my synagogue service this morning on Zoom. I just wanted to reiterate that. How do I do that and hold both? It's prophetic. There has to be justice that flows like a mighty stream. So I continue to believe that. And after October 7th, my commitment towards a just future for all peoples in the world has become that much stronger. And, you know, it's very, very disheartening for me to hear what's happened in Israeli society since October 7th in terms of commitment to building equality between Israelis and Palestinians, where people are retreating into their own tribe rather than reaching out and listening.
Thank you for everything that you're doing, Mazen and Jesse. And Judy, you do so much to keep hope alive, that we as individuals can make a difference. So I really don't have a question except to say I hope you realize how much I love you and respect you all.
Thank you very much. You know, we each do what we can. Sometimes we feel pretty helpless. I mean, even today, I was just talking to a friend and I was saying that, you know, I'm working like 16 hours a day on these issues and 7 days a week. But, you know, bottom line, I was depressed a little bit earlier today. I said, bottom line, we haven't stopped this genocide. It's still going on. And now they are talking about going into Rafah, which is, you know, used to be about 300,000 people in Rafah, which is about 1/5 of the landmass of the Gaza Strip. And now Rafah has 1.5 million people, from 300,000 to 1.5 million over an area of about 62 square kilometers. So that's about 27,000 individuals per square kilometer. Square kilometer, by the way, is about a quarter of a square mile or something like that, or a third of a square mile. So you can imagine how crowded this place is. And if Israel goes in with its military, they were already bombing Rafah today as we speak. Already, I was looking at the news, 55 people in Rafah were killed, 55 civilians, whole families. This is supposed to be the safe place that they drove Palestinians towards. So imagine now if they go militarily there, there's no other place they can go to unless they bomb the separation barrier between the Gaza Strip and Egypt and force them to go to Egypt. And I'm thinking that's the plan of the Israeli government. You know, it's terrible. And, you know, when you think about these things, you know, I go back to Gramsci's statement, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. And I keep saying to myself, I have to be optimistic. I have to keep the hope alive. I have to keep going, you know. But it's sometimes very hard. And it is hard, getting harder. But, you know, presence of people like you and support around the world, demonstrations today in most major cities, still going strong, making the politicians squirm a little more and try to insert language that shows that they are not totally callous, but still supporting Israel and supporting the genocide, like Biden and his
Yeah,
team.
I call him Bisis now. He's just horrible. You know, it's horrible what our government's doing. It's horrible. It's horrible. It has to stop. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, I feel powerless and depressed most of the time. I like to read things from people that, you know, have been imprisoned or, you know, cooed or whatever, positive things from them, because I feel like I've never been through anything quite as bad as them. So I want to read from this book, The Impossible Will Take a Little Longer. And this is a quote from Václav Havel, right? In prison, he wrote this. The kind of hope I often think about, especially in situations that are particularly hopeless, such as prison, I understand above all as a state of mind, not a state of the world. Either we have hope within us or we don't. It's a dimension of the soul. It's not especially dependent on some particular observation of the world or estimation of a situation. Hope is not prognostication. It's an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced and is anchored somewhere beyond the horizons. Hope in this deep and powerful sense is not the same as joy that things are going well, or the willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously headed for early success, but rather an ability to work for something because it is good, not even because it has a chance to succeed. The more unpropitious the situation in which we demonstrate hope, the deeper the hope is. Hope is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. In short, I think the deepest and most important form of hope, the only one that can keep us above water and urge us to good works, and the only true source of the breathtaking dimension of the human spirit and its effort, is something we get if it were from elsewhere. It is also this hope above all, which gives us the strength to live and continually to try things, even in conditions that seem as hopeless as ours do, here and now.
I mean, I'll read a similar quote if you want. I sent this in my email 4 days ago.
Yeah, please.
Howard Zinn, he says to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there were so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act and at least the possibility of sending the spinning top of the world in a different direction. And if we act in however small way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents. And to live today, now, as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory.
Yes, it is. I am wondering if Elaine Johnson would unmute and say a prayer or a inspiring word, because you always do.
As I'm listening, my heart is full. Mazin, to actually see and experience someone that is going through this difficult and atrocious situation, it's really putting things in a different perspective for me. I try not to listen to the news too much, but just being with you, being with your wife, and all who are present here is just mind-blowing and heart-opening for me. I was going through some papers today, old papers, and right now I'm looking at a picture of Mother Teresa with her hands in that position of prayer. And one of her statements is like, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" And I just want us all to be in the circle of love. We are not forsaken. The Spirit of God is with us. We are not alone, and you're not alone, Mazin. We are with you in this struggle, and we hold you dearly in a circle of love. Each day that you rise, know that God has given you a purpose. He's given you a job, and it's not done yet. And we're here to support you. I just wish I could be there in the physical, but know that every day you are surrounded by love. And my heart just goes out to you all. And we just love you. We love you every day, and never give up. Never lose hope. You're here for a reason. We're all divinely present here and now. And as you so eloquently said, the future is made up of present moments. And this is the moment. This is your time. And go forth in faith and in love. And so it is.
So we'll close and give thanks and just to affirm what Elaine Johnson said, that we are one, that we have every day Mazin and Jesse in our hearts, and we want you to know you're not alone, and that we connect with each other in hope, and we're not going to give up until the last one of us is standing. Thanks again.